Hello. No, it's not another skip day. I just been a bit busy. Have you thought about the fact that we tend to exaggerate everything to an extreme? Um, let's consider, for example, how we move around, right? Vehicles. In the past few years, there's a huge push to be, like, say, environmental conscious about how vehicles and fuels and how energy is produced, things like that. Um, Other than the fact that most of the ideas that we are currently running with are sitting on technology that is quite old with a new spin, like the electrical car, which is dependent to it. It's really, really old. Google it up. You're going to find it really amazing. So in essence, it's basically something all that we put a new label on it, adjust a few things, and we're running with it. Now that everything's fine and sort of cool if you enjoy that sort of thing, but we tend to forget about everything else. Like, for example, clothes these days tend to wear out really fast, and everyone wants to have multiple clothes across instead of having a piece of collection of clothes that you go through an extended period of time. Things now wear out so fast that by the end of the season, you probably next season you're going to need probably half of your clothes going to be in the trash. And brands and stores have a big push, be constantly pushing things out cheaper and cheaper and cheaper so that people keep buying these things. And it's completely opposite, right? So on one end, we're focusing on the environmentally friendly because carbon monoxide and all those things are really bad. But all the fabrics that go into the trash and then used to make more clothes, where are those going? More importantly, how much material are we consuming to create all these massive quantities of things? So there's two sides of the balance on there, and we tend to go over the extremes. Um, it's not just on things. Technology itself has been shaped like that. I talked about that in the first video where we went from IDSs and IPSs um, to EDRs and O-Day protection. We all know that for an O-Day to be detected, it basically means that it's not an O-Day somewhere else. O-Day also is a label that we assign to something that is not patched yet, not really unknown. So there's a bit of a trap there, so to speak, because in one end you have something that is it might be known that exists and an issue that might be known or recognized or but not really patched yet. Um, but is offered and labeled and sold by most defenses as something that is magical and protects you against something that is completely unknown that nobody is the first time it's used is already that someone tries to exploit it already is already detected. The truth of the matter is that the cases of where that happens are slim, extremely slim, and reduced, but they sell. And they sell because, once again, we tend to exaggerate one end of the spectrum and completely forget about the other factors, like the details of it. Because we all had these instances in this where a lot of companies started getting hacked. And once ransomwares and got really popular because they're really profitable. then everyone's attention got into the mix, and now it's just not just that only a few people know about the issue. A lot of people know. In some cases, actually public. So there's you have a problem. We need to protect ourselves against the fact that we don't or we can't patch our systems, or we don't know how to properly patch our systems, or software is really hard. I'm sitting on I'm sitting on an unpatched vulnerability that I found from in one of the clients that we did an assessment for, and I can't find a way to register the CVE or find a vendor. I know it's the paid software because it has a license embedded into the source code. But it's extremely hard. In those cases, you're basically sitting on a pretty hot stuff, or unknown vulnerabilities, depending on where you fall into the spectrum. If you go to the dark side, you might have a lot of fun on it. I have a lot of fun with it, and that is another side effect, right? All the defenses and all of the protections we have, and even if we consider the memory protections that we have, they're quite effective, I may add. There's also another side effect, other than the fact it made exploitation a bit kind of hard. It's hard's probably not a better word, but it requires a bit of work, but not really impossible. So if something is out of reach for many in this field, some will think that is impossible now. It's not worth pursuing. Others will see it's not really like that, and maybe take a dive. You should take a dive on it. And then we have something that becomes really, really valuable. And there lies another problem. Because if you can sell a vulnerability for $1 million, $2 million, it will change your life. It will definitely change your life. Now, who's buying? Now these days, you don't need to sell these on a shady thing somewhere. They're actually legitimate places where you can sell them. Some pay more than others, but they will pay. Most of them have one thing in common, though. That is, you're not meant to police, make reference to it, or tell anyone about it. Which means that only really restrict number of people know about the issue. And once you sell it, then you don't know how that thing is going to be used. Well, we can assume that if you're selling it to the software vendor, chances are it's going to be used to patch the vulnerability. Or not. Or not. Maybe they'll say that, oh, it's a feature. Or if it falls into some let's say creative organization, it might be used for other means or other things. And there's another pickle. There's a pickle that most don't really want to talk about, right? It's something that we don't really address. Is like, okay, so yeah, now we have EDRs and memory protection, so the world is safe. We solved the problem. We don't see, well, Metasploit is almost exploit free in the last few years. RCs are dwindling, so the problem is solved. So we don't have any Petya things anymore. There's more multiple ways to skin a cat. If I may use that analogy, I might get in trouble with that. Let's continue. But there's multiple ways of doing things, and I just going through Dark and Diaries. This is a cool podcast I listen to. There's one of the episodes, one interview of someone that is quite interesting. He goes through his idea of how things are. I won't go into it. Just if you're familiar with the episodes, you probably know what I mean. Um, and how he talks about getting into organizations and stuff like that, which is pretty fun. But there, you have multiple points of entry, right? All it takes for you is to click on something, opening a file, and it doesn't even have to be the classic macro, right? If you find an issue on a PDF, then things become dire. Because the other cases of vulnerabilities that led to execution of code just by mailing someone, right? Um, and and um, and all of those are essentially options. Like all it takes is for someone to make a mistake. And even if we exclude the fact that training will allow us to divert most of the issues because we're not opening emails from someone that we don't know, yada yada yada. There's the main difference, right? I already talked about this. And the red teaming and the assessments, legitimate assessments we do have constraints, have scopes. Real threat doesn't have scopes. Okay? A real threat will tier a company into multiple layers. It will probably go after, before it goes after any employee, it will probably go after some of the weak spots related to the employee. First level, second level, third level, probably you can go as far as trying to hack his connection to his house connection or home Wi-Fi, home router, because those are usually pretty vulnerable. There's an ISP in Portugal, the TR65's password, management password is 3 letters. And it's actually online. Pretty much everyone in Portugal knows it. So that's a scary example of that. Um, and if we consider that, we see that in there lies the problem, right? And one of the reasons why some of the assessments start with assumed breach, because we all know that even after all these things, there's always blind spots. So there's always these extremes. On the learning side and knowledge side, is the extreme is we tend to try to solve all of these things by finding other ways to solve one very interesting issue. That is, most of the time, acquiring knowledge requires time. And that means that you need to go through, well, a series of iterations of acquiring knowledge. And that is composed by reading or having some base on something else. And in the technical field, having a practical session on it. The more and this iteration between theory and practice is what builds up the knowledge base. The more error, the more mistakes you make, the more memory you create about a subject. And that's basically the reason why you practice. You don't practice to memorize it, you practice to make mistakes. Is by doing mistakes that you actually memorize things, because you will recall those, say, I made this mistake before, or I need to do this way, because if I don't, I will have this issue or that issue down the line, right? One of the reasons why a lot of senior developers, for example, keep saying you shouldn't do that way, it will bite your ass in the near future. And and a lot of pushback happens, like why and there's later you will understand. And for most, this is not well received. And security, we we had the same issue, right? Instead of teaching people C, we started saying that we should pursue other ways of achieving um, similar results, like memory safe languages. And then when I started, and I actually started seeking for a job in C, I was extremely naive. And I ended up finding a job in Java. And spent a great deal of time with it. Now, the little knowledge of C that I had allowed me to be quite effective at Java because I knew what the magic underneath was, how the magic underneath was happening. And this allows me to to easily build applications that were more stable than gross majority. And one of the reasons why I've acquired responsibilities quite fast on development as well. Um, and it was quite easy to build big things from the start. And but for the gross majority, those who are not in contact or have little to zero contact with those types of languages don't get to understand what the luxury of memory safe language. And for a big chunk of time was Java and .NET, right? And then Python came, and then a lot of other things came, and then Golang, and God, it's basically and right now it feels like every month there's a new language. Um, and now is Rust and Zig and Jesus Christ, I can't even remember all the names now. And all of them trying to solve the same thing. It's basically the same thing over and over again, right? Memory safe language. We should pursue memory safe languages. It's no, really now. This time it is the real deal. Now this one really solves it. Like really, really, really solves it. Um, all of them have advantages and disadvantages. I usually say that you should choose the language that fits the project, not otherwise. This also means that either you are the kind of person that likes to build things in multiple technologies and you really don't have favorites, which is really hard, or you're going to be like, can't do that because I don't believe that we could do this in this language, and there will be pushback for that, right? Um, so most of the time, and I think .NET actually escaped this some of the problems that came with some of these new languages. Like Java has a problem with dependencies and the class loader and how you load libraries and different versions of libraries and collisions of namespaces and a lot of problems. Python also started having the same issue. That's why you have virtual spaces and pip and all those things to create a niche, a containerized runtime where you have the dependencies for a single application. It's the same problem, right? We're building the great Egyptian pyramid of dependencies every time we start an application. If we go and go, whoa, then things take a whole different level because they're really immense. They're really big. Really, it goes interesting. It's fast. It has a very set of interesting concepts and concurrency, for example, but the binaries are immense. And every time you download something, you feel like you're downloading the entire web. Um, and it's essentially the same thing. .NET escaped that problem for a a long time because it was essentially controlled by Microsoft, and the .NET framework was big, really big, and it kept growing in a lot of stuff. Once they created .NET Core, being multiple, supporting multiple operating systems, things started to open up a bit, and there are a few projects that you can already see similar issues emerging. That so in most of the cases, and I've talked with a few people that say that the gross majority of these languages, the main problem is complexity and dependencies. Because libraries are incomplete. The standard libraries are most grossly incomplete or too big, and things become too complex, which is basically the same problem in C. Um, Memory corruption bugs are essentially because the glibc in the standard libraries assume that you know what you're doing. And the only way for you to know what you're doing is by experimenting with it and breaking your head. That means that someone will probably take some time until it's actually quite profitable. And for an organization, that's an issue, right? Because you need someone to be productive in a short period of time. And there lies the problem. So what have we done? Now we created smaller teams. We put juniors in front of it. We try to avoid things like that, like complex technologies like C and C++, and try to use other things. Try to use JavaScript on the back end. Jesus Lord. That's a whole different level. And but the issue is the same, right? Java applications, if there's not a stack exception, stack trace on the log, then it's not Java, right? Um, and it blows up on everyone's faces, and it's slow, and it's this, and it's that, and the same could be said for a lot of other languages as well, right? Try doing anything on Rust. If you start with C, just the syntax alone, I know it's fast, and it is true. It's blazingly fast. Interestingly fast. Trying to reverse that thing is a nightmare. And if you try to go from C, I tried to go through it a number of times, and still, I just lose my. I just don't like. I have other things to do. It's a pain. I know there are advantages of it, but I feel like this is too much. And I feel like it's a bit too far. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. The reality is experience. We're trying to come up with the experience. So I'm rambling a lot, but where am I going with this? The effects of GPT, right? And I've talked with a few, and they are starting to see the effects of it. The depth of the knowledge dwindling, meaning you can be effective at doing something without really knowing what you're doing, right? Because you have a very effective search. You can search for a particular issue and it will illustrate you what, well, in the vicinity, will contextualize you what might be wrong. And you might succeed in fixing it in a reasonable amount of time. Knowledge you acquire related to that slim to none. But most of the time, that also has a name. And one of the first things you learn when junior developer is to avoid starting debugging an issue right away. Just first try to go through the code and understand the issue in question before you start actually debugging it. Because by debugging it, you will understand the symptom, not the issue. You'll see it is going off because of that. Now, if you don't understand the real source of the issue, but why is it doing that, you will basically put an if on it. Just if it's this, just don't. Throw an exception. Who's handling that? I have no idea. And that is not solving your problem. That's putting a ban later on, somewhere else in the code, that thing's gonna blow up. And this is how code gets bloated really fast and really slow. Is all those conditions that start to emerge. That's because you really didn't understand the problem. Probably is above, or you need to deal with it in some other way. Or it's probably just a use case that didn't add into consideration some factor that it's now emerging. Those things you can only understand if you go through the code, and that's part of the experience. That's part of the experience that these days we don't want to have. We want to be for things to be really fast and go really fast. And one of the reasons why GPDs are going off, and one of the reasons why we've seen leaks from private code related to mobile source codes. I think it was Samsung, where they were using GPT, first instance of GPT to help them to fix problems in their firmware source code, believe it or not. That is basically because working with C. Nobody knows C anymore. But then a lot of the stuff is built on that. So where are we going? Is it's been an interesting to see how this evolves, and I think this is not going to end. We could ask about things like how effective is, or how put on the scale the effectiveness of the memory protections that we have, or the many monetization systems, and the fact that we need big teams. Teams are really stressed out most of the time, unable to explain to the other levels of the hierarchy why they need so much time to go through an important event, or why we have basically most of the teams working in highly stressful environments and on almost in burnout state. And the fact that exploits are being sold like there's no tomorrow, and the gross majority of us are essentially unaware of it. Only when in particular high-profile cases things show up, we get to know, and that's essentially a trade-off. I don't think there's a correct answer there. This is basically a thinking exercise that we should all take in order to basically see if we can find any balance on it, and avoid as much as possible to choose something because just because everyone else is doing the same thing, right? I think there should be a I think that the balance is having distributed things distributed. There's just delicate there, not too far, right? Linux has the ability to register CVEs now, and I actually got a bit surprised because they went from not everything is a vulnerability to everything is a vulnerability now. Everything has its own CVE. Man, it's strange, right? It's off. It doesn't make any sense. But that is not uncommon. So that's pretty much it. What was on this week's vlog. I'm going to be working on Ansible. That is going to be probably on Monday ish. We're going to basically see how that thing ticks. One of the reasons why I'm became such a fan of it. Simple things. I'm going to show you can start a project, edit files, and play with light HTTPD for a start, because it has configuration files and so on. It's a really good idea to get you started on there. Although we're going to see that for a single machine, like a virtual machine, just as an example. But the real advantage of something like that is actually when you want to do that at scale, like you have multiple machines or deploying your own lab. When it's where that thing is really fun. And that should be it.